Joining me now is civil rights lawyer, former counsel to Mayor de Blasio, and former chairwoman of the city's police oversight agency. And full disclosure, she's also a former MSNBC contributor right here on The Beat, the candidate for mayor of New York City, Maya Wiley. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Ari, as I roll through town.
I see you there. It's not carpool karaoke, but I know that this is such a busy time on your campaign schedule anyway. Let's start with your closing argument here. We've seen, as mentioned, you poll pretty close in the polls here as a front runner. What's the closing argument to New Yorkers?
Primarily that we are a miraculous city, and we're going to recover from COVID. We already are in that process. But we're also at a crossroads where we have the opportunity not just for a caretaking government, but for a government that is bold and transformative and actually ensures that we have housing we can afford, that we don't pay more than 30% of our income for, that we can end street homelessness. We can make sure we are safe from crime, but also police violence, and make sure every single one of our kids has a bright future and an opportunity in schools they can enjoy. But that does require a bold and transformational leadership that knows how to work on government from within government. And that's the experience I bring as a civil rights lawyer, but also as someone who's had the experience to know just how much more government can do than it has done. And with the courage to confront developers, to confront the bureaucracy, and frankly, to confront the NYPD so we get done what we need for our people.
You mentioned NYPD, and that's a big issue that all over the country, people are looking at different approaches to policing. At this moment, though, crime is also rising in New York and several cities. We have metrics that show the trends over the last year or so, with shootings and murders increasing. Your program, Maya, is to slash the NYPD budget by about $1 billion. And at the debate this week, many people around the nation may not have seen this, one of your rival candidates, Kathryn Garcia, criticizing that kind of thing. Let's take a look.
These are complicated times, and several of my opponents are using hashtags to hashtag defund the police. I just don't think that's the right approach. You need to sit down and really think through these things.
What's your response from that issue, which is big in New York but around the country? And again, some of the criticism from your rivals and others is basically taking issue with your plank, saying that your ideas won't actually make New York safer.
Well, what I say is I don't have a hashtag. I have a plan that is based on evaluation, research, data, and facts, and not fear. And that means looking at what has actually prevented guns from being shot before they're shot. We all spend a lot of time talking about whether or not we need more police, and the short answer is we simply do not. But the reason we don't, which we're not talking enough about, is because we have increased the size of the police force because the size of our mentally ill population has increased. In fact, it's increased by 100,000 calls to 911, over the past decade. And what we've done is we've increased the size of the police department to be mental health crisis responders rather than investing those resources in mental health crisis responders. And if you talk to police officers, they don't want to, it's not what they signed up for the force for. And in fact, 18 people have been shot and killed by the police in the last few years are people who are mentally ill, when what we could have done is responded to the problem with the people qualified to respond to them. So I'm expanding public safety because I am following the research and the facts. And I'm also recognizing that, frankly, we have to have greater police accountability, and we don't do that when we just accept an assertion from the police department that we need them to keep us safe when too many Black and brown New Yorkers have found the opposite to be true. But Ari, there's one thing I want to make very clear. I'm the candidate at the top of this race who has not been endorsed by any police union. Think about that. I'm the only one. And if you think about who have been the greatest forces opposing even the most modest of reforms, it is the police unions who have endorsed the other top three candidates in this race. So I stand here before you to say, I know what it feels like to be afraid of crime. I know what it's like to fear police violence too. And it's simply a lie that we have to choose one or the other. But it does mean we have to be smart with our resources and recognize where we can invest them in the things that actually solve the problems we have. And those calls don't need to go to the police department. They need to go to mental health professionals.
Right, and I appreciate, Maya, part of what you're saying and educating our viewers on is something we've covered, which is not a binary on police or no police, fund or defund, but who actually is the best person from the government to respond to different things, to de-escalate, to avoid what even police departments say in some of these mental health cases are tragedies. Were they avoidable? Yeah. So I appreciate your answer there. I want to ask you about another thing, and it's a piece of criticism, and longtime Beat viewers may know, as a journalist, I'm neutral in the race. I'm not neutral on Maya Wiley. I think that you have tremendous insights to bring to bear, which is why we had you on the beat so much. But in the role as journalist, I got to ask you about some criticism in the New York Times for your response. This is a big article people in New York may have noticed. They talk about, quote, Maya Wiley taking credit for the firing of a very controversial officer from this case. And they quote folks, for example, saying Maya taking credit for bringing that officer, Pantaleo, to justice is not accurate. Director of the Brooklyn Movement Center saying we're not looking for another mayor who's, quote, good on rhetoric and bad on accountability. So as this part of the job, I did want to ask you about that. That is some criticism there and your response.
You know, look, my response is simply this. One, I am proud of the role that I played in getting the case, spent a year as the head of the CCRB, as the chair, and in that year got the case against Daniel Pantaleo over with our strongest charges, our strongest recommendations we are allowed to make under the charter, the city charter, to get him off the force, to fire him, and protecting the role of our civilian prosecutors to do just that. And the second is it's why I'm not endorsed by the police unions, unlike my other candidates that are running in this race.
Which I will say, now I'm jumping in like I do on all the candidates, which you reminded us, but is an interesting thing about where some of the Democratic primary politics may be going. You're touting that. You're basically implying that endorsements are something people should take a close look at, depending on the issues with the opponents that you have. Maya, I know how busy you are running around for every last vote in the car. Thank you for joining us tonight.